Welcome to this strategy-rich edition of The One Thing podcast, hosted by Ron Sheetz. On each episode, Ron introduces you to the amazingly successful entrepreneurs from his Rolodex who reveal the simple truths behind the one marketing strategy they rely on to produce extraordinary results. Each episode is guaranteed to expose you to a proven approach for producing high-value and highly profitable business. Welcome to this episode of The One Thing podcast.
Hello, everybody. It's Ron Sheetz, and welcome to another episode of the One Thing Business Podcast. I have with me today Darin Garman, who is a commercial, for lack of a better term, a commercial real estate investor. He'll fill you in more on the details about that. I first learned of Darin back in 2006 when I first landed in the Kennedy world on Planet Dan, as they say. Darin's name was one that Dan used and referenced and so forth about smart marketing. And I'll let Darin get into it a little more about that. If you want to learn just superficially, I was given the privilege to be in the same book with Darin recently, Dan Kennedy's book, Succeeding in Business by Breaking All the Rules. One of the things that you'll learn about Darin as we go along and talk is that Darin is a renegade entrepreneur, and that's a lot about breaking rules. Not about doing things wrong, but just doing things that are not traditional dogma and the way you go about doing it. So, Darin, thank you for taking the time to be with me today.
Hey, hi, Ron. Good to see you again. I'm looking forward to our conversation. I really am.
So, would you just take a few moments and fill the audience in on what you do, how you not so much how you do it and so forth, but what makes you different in the commercial real estate space, if that's the right designation?
Yeah, no, you're right on. And so, I'll go back and I won't go into too much detail, but so I graduated college, thought I was going to be in the criminal justice world. I worked at a prison for 2.5 years, decided that's not for me. And I always thought I'd like to be involved in real estate, but didn't have training, didn't really know. So I just quit the job at the prison, jumped in and started in the real estate business. Okay, so that would have been over 30 years ago. And my start, how I thought I would start, is being a real estate agent. Okay, so got my real estate license, thought it was a good way to learn the real estate market, what's going on. And that proved to be true. However, right away, I found out that, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other real estate agents out there, and they're all saying pretty much the same thing. So what am I going to do to kind of, separate myself and my message from what everybody else was saying? So as a result, Ron, I went ahead and decided I'm going to specialize and be the go-to guy in the sale and purchase of apartment properties. That's it. That's what I'm going to do. So anybody wants to buy apartment property, sell an apartment property, I want to be their go-to guy for that. Okay. So I started to go ahead and craft my marketing around that. Okay. It was about that time, Ron, and we can talk more about this. This is kind of a little segue, but I'll come back. That's when I was first introduced to Dan Kennedy, was about this time when I decided to go down this path and really started to learn about how important, the marketing aspect and the messages were. Okay. But back to the ranch. So back to it. So I spent about 15 years being a top sales guy selling apartment communities. So if you're interested in buying or selling an apartment community in the eastern half of Iowa, I'm the guy that you called. So sold hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of apartment communities during that time. And then it was about 15 years into it, Ron, I started to get people approach me saying, hey, I want to own these things, but I don't really want to deal with the management. I don't want to deal with the management, the legal stuff. I don't want to deal with that. What do you suggest? Well, first I started pointing them to property management companies. Just hire a property management company. They'll take care of it for you. And as many of them discovered, that's just a small Band-Aid to not having to be involved. They found that they're still involved.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result of more and more people coming to me, I basically I made the decision of, well, I'm seeing the results of what my clients are getting by owning these apartment communities, and I don't own any of them yet. I'm just selling them. Okay. And at the same time, I've got many people approaching me saying, hey, is there any way you can help me own, but I don't want to deal with this? So as a result, I started putting together partnerships to buy apartment communities. Okay. And it originally started with, small partnerships, buying maybe a 12 unit, maybe a 24 unit property. And I kept doing this year after year until eventually, geez, we had well over 30 different partnerships operating and going on out there. And not surprisingly, as a result of that, my time and focus and energy started to really go from the sales end of things now over to the ownership end of things. I mean, not only as a result of that was taking up more of my time, but there's one thing about you can make a lot of real estate commissions. That's nice. But the wealth is in the equity and owning the property. It took me, by the way, 15 years to figure that out, but I started to figure that out. And then it was around 2015, 2016, I went ahead and I merged, some would call it a roll up. I merged all of these partnerships into one partnership that owned, everything, and everyone that was involved just didn't own their specific property. They owned everything. And that goes by the name of Heartland Investment Partners. And so, you fast forward to today from there, we own a little bit over 1,200 apartment units. We're still looking to continue to grow and expand and add to the empire, I'll call it. So we're still looking to do that and are doing that. We have a little bit under 100 partners that own the properties with us, and they live in all places, come from all walks of life, that own the properties with us. And so spend, most of my time overseeing the management and the running of those partnerships and the properties and the acquisitions. And then from time to time, when we decide to sell some things, I go ahead and I oversee that. In addition to that, not surprisingly, we've got a brokerage business still, property management business, maintenance business, that's attached with that. And so, all of those things are kind of all intertwined into, having just a few balls up in the air. I probably told you more than you wanted to hear, but that's me. I don't even think that's in a nutshell, but that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things, an anecdotal story that you told last month at the meeting was about, your, what's the word I'm looking for? Enjoying not having any employees. And today it's entirely a different animal than what it was then. Because you got 100 partners who they want to be hands off on it.
Yeah.
And,
it's so funny because I dug out an old dust covered CD of a conference call I did with Dan, and it was towards the end of that brokerage world and then getting more in, just as I was starting into the ownership side of things. And I was literally bragging on the call about, I don't have any employees. I mean, I got an assistant, but I really don't need any. I don't want any. That's all for people that don't really know any better. That isn't what I said directly, but if you read between the lines, that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
And you go from that to, I'm on the way on the other end of the spectrum now. I'm looking for more. I want to get more. And it's just funny how things evolve. It really, really is.
You want to get more or you need more.
Well, need. I mean, it's need. I mean, Thank you for clarifying that. It's need.
Who wants more employees?
It's needing. Yeah, but it's so funny how you go from one thing to complete other side of it. As a result of the decisions that you make, and I'm glad I did. It's obviously been a good thing for me to go down this road and do those kinds of things. But man, it's definitely something I never thought I would be doing. Never thought I'd be doing.
Well, since you told that story and I heard that, I kind of like put that in the file folder in the back of my mind, because all this time, and I've had the same conversation with Dan, is the fact is I don't have any employees. I don't want any employees. I keep wanting to do, I want to kind of model my business after what he's done and so forth. And of all things, who do I have a conference with today is somebody in Alabama who could potentially do some video editing for me on, and I'm like, damn, is this the first step to the first employee? Because I had employees and got away from that. So your story resonates, and I keep in the back of my head is just kind of like keep that litmus of, do you really want to do this?
Yeah.
So that was helpful for me. So let's get to the core of our subject here, the one thing.
Sure.
So, Darin, in your experience and what you've done and what you've built, there is no one thing. However, we, incessantly look for the one thing that's going to carry a lot of the weight for us in financial attraction and client attraction and that type of thing. If I dropped you into some place and said you could only have one thing to really work with, to promote, to attract, whatever, what would you say is your one thing? And even, some subsequent things. But for you, what's your one thing?
Yeah. I mean, that's such a great question. And I'm sure when you ask people that, you just get a variety of answers. I mean, and I'm sure whatever those answers are from people is what probably comes to mind first, and what's kind of been their most successful thing, they're successful. And so I'm probably like a lot of folks that you've already talked to in thinking about that. And, it's hard to point to one thing, but, the more I've thought about it in terms of from where I was now talking about the employee thing to where to where I was then to where I am now, my answer to you would be, with all that in mind, my answer to you would be, at first, it's going to sound a little bit like taking a step back so you can take like 5 steps forward. Okay. And so the first thing I would do is I would start compiling a customer list, a customer/prospect list, a prospect and customer list. Okay. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't wing it. I wouldn't, try to just fly by the seat. By the way, this is from experience. I wouldn't try to fly by the seat of my pants and hoping this might work or that might work. It would be to sit down, take the step back, and go through the process of, okay, how do I start to establish a prospect and a customer list of people that will have a reasonable amount of interest in what I am, either business, service, whatever it is, that have that would be reasonably interested in what I have to offer. Okay. Because everything else, at least in my mind, when I look at least what I've done, everything else expands from that. Okay. Everything from the marketing, what kind of marketing, how often is the marketing done, the communication. I mean, almost everything starts to go from the foundation of having a list of people that you're either doing business with or you want to do business with, and continuing to work on that list. I'll tell you a quick story. So, one of the things that I do is a couple times a year, I open up the window for investors to get involved with us if they want to invest with us and own the real estate that we own here. Okay. It only happens a couple times a year, typically. And so part of that is having the prospect list where I'm continually having conversations with people about getting involved in what we do, because it's only a couple times a year. The transaction only happens obviously twice a year. And so I get a call one day from a guy who is on my mailing list, and that's direct mail. So that's mail that they get. And he gets an email from me at least 5 to 6 times a week. He gets a couple pieces of mail from me a month. Okay. And he says, yeah, I've been getting your stuff. I've been now getting your stuff for about 2 years, he says. I'm thinking, holy cow, 2 years. It's taken 2 years. So he said, I've been getting about 2 years, and I'm going to be up your way traveling. Can I stop by and can we have a conversation? I kind of want to see what you're up to. Okay, all right. So I make arrangements. He comes and I meet him at his hotel. So I go and I pick him up. He comes out of the hotel. And by the way, this is a typical, Days Inn kind of hotel. This is not, Four Seasons kind of place. This is like Days Inn hotel. So he comes out wearing a soccer warm-up outfit from the 1970s. All right, like velour. It's like velour, like a bluish purplish velour. Got a lot of facial hair, and his name's Hal. And so nice to meet you. A little bit of small talk, and he points and says, "Yeah, that's my car over there. I drove here with that. Of course, it's one of the newer at the time, like Prius or electric car, Prius kind of cars." So I'm thinking to myself, "Oh no, oh geez, what have I got myself into?" So we go to my office, and we just start, talking and answering some of his general questions. And after about an hour, Ron, here's what he opens up and he tells me. He says, the main reason I'm here is I've got a home in Hawaii. I've got it sold for a little bit over $15 million to a celebrity that you would know, but I'm under contract. I can't tell you who it is. It's somebody that you would know. And I need to find something to buy with my $15 million. Okay. And I'm totally blown away at this point. I'm totally blown away. So what I find out, and he reveals to me, is that him and two other guys started a tech company back in the late 70s, early 80s, if you can imagine a tech company. And this is the day when computers were all just real computers, not like they are today. And they ended up selling their software and their system to Microsoft. And of course, he exited with just a ton of money as a result of that sale. And, decided he's going to he owned real estate in 8 states, condos mainly, vacation like Tahoe and Florida, all places like that, and then also own this place in Hawaii. Okay. So over a period, Ron, of 3 years, this guy ended up investing over $3 million with me and with the properties that he bought, and still is with me to this day.
Wow.
Okay. Unfortunately, he has since passed. He's passed on, but his heirs are still involved with what we're doing. And so I kind of go through the kind of long story, I guess, of telling you that story. But if I wouldn't have had a customer or prospect list that I'm continually working on as the foundation of communicating with them like I did, Hal would have never showed up.
Yeah.
He would have never showed up. And I have hundreds of examples, not as extreme like that, that's, like that extreme, but I have hundreds of examples in various shapes and forms of that. And if I wouldn't have started compiling or having compiled that prospect and customer list, none of that would have happened. None of it would have happened.
Yeah. Well, I jotted a note down, which you just answered when you said about compiling the list is that it was, okay, well, once you have the list, what do you do with it? And you've just described it, is that, and one of the things that is a big irritation that I hear more and more frequently, especially with the internet and social media having developed into advertising and marketing mediums, is that we can get leads, we can get prospects from the internet, from online sources. And it's just a growing contention that I hear more and more, oh, we get a lot of leads, but there are a lot of bad leads.
Mm-hmm.
And where I've been able, and I question this, where I drill this down into and find out is that it seems to be, and this is a big sweeping umbrella statement, but you'll get it, as will a lot of the listeners. It seems to be becoming more and more that businesses want to do business. They want to take people's money as quickly as they possibly can, or get their money as quickly as they possibly can without a lot of investment in it. And
Without a lot of work.
Yeah. And
put in the work.
And one of the things that Dan has always said is that he who spends the most wins.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what you're talking about. As a side note, I showed at last month's meeting, I showed all the marketing stuff that I've put together for my dental stuff. What I've done since is sat down and looked at, okay, what's the follow-up once somebody gets all that stuff?
Right.
And you made the comment, hey, you put a lot of work into this. And I did, but I sat down and said, okay, what's all the follow-up? Once they get this front end, what's the follow-up? And so far, I'm at 28 physical follow-up pieces, and I'm probably in the neighborhood of about 50 or 60 digital follow-ups that go out over a period of time.
Yeah.
Because, something that was said in the mastermind, which I know, but we forget more than we learn, is that dripping on them is far, far more valuable than throwing up on them.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that. I wrote down follow-up is kind of like a second, like close to the list thing for me. I mean, you hit the nail right on the head. I don't know. Well, I do know. I would not be talking to you, having this conversation, if it wasn't for immediately now following up, and without it sounding the way it's going to sound, following up with them until they die. I mean, that's basically it.
Yeah.
Or, they send you threatening, whatever, mail or messages, stop sending me so damn much mail.
Yeah.
But yeah, the follow-up, and here's, you're so right, because it's kind of the in thing out there, especially with marketing and social media, is you don't have to do that, because all you got to do is you have this ad on social media, and that's all you got to do. And you've got these bots that might follow up with them electronically. So, set it and forget it kind of thing. And that's actually, from a competitive standpoint, I mean, I'm glad that that's what they think, because that's, and sure, you may get some people. I mean, you may get some people, but to be able to have something that is going to continue to be sustaining, like what we're talking about, man, it's a whole different ballgame with that follow-up. And you said you got what, 28 physical and like 50 some digital?
Yeah. So far, that's what I've kind of mapped out as far as the touch points on the thing.
Yeah.
Because as we talked, the investment, like yours, the investment's not small. So I'm investing in the relationship and the trust over the period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it with your story about how people buy when they're ready to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Hal wasn't ready to buy until he ended up with $15 million in his lap.
Right.
With what do I do with this?
Mm-hmm.
Dan often talks about Ted Oakley in, the people who sell their businesses for $50, $100 million. Well, you don't have a need until you have the need.
Yeah.
So, I'm right with you, as my philosophy is keep following up with them until they buy, die, or just say stop.
Yeah.
Because that has been, though it's not necessarily a strategy, that has been a one thing for me, is I just outlast my competition.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like you, I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I can outlast anybody. because they just don't have the stamina, or I don't know what the right word is. They want it now. And if I can't find it now, I'll go someplace else. It's Halbert's. You don't need a new hamburger. You just need a hungry crowd.
Well, and you said it, you didn't say it directly, but you said it, and here's what you said. Nobody else will really do it.
Yeah.
You know, there will be, you know, when I say nobody, that's not 100% correct, but it's 99% correct. Nobody else will do it. And so it's actually, I don't know, it's kind of weird because it's not really hard to differentiate yourself if you just do that, because no one else really does it. It's kind of like sometimes I'll get people contacting me. It's like, okay, I give up. You know, I give up. And so I mean, nobody else really does it. And so just by doing that and being consistent with that, is just something that is just, especially today, it's just not seen anymore.
Yeah.
It's just not seen anymore. So yeah, I mean, and I know that, especially when we use our direct mail pieces, I know when we send out whatever 1,000 pieces, I know that each month we send some stuff. We're not going to get, you know, we know that not everybody's going to be calling us 3 days later, you know, with money in hand, ready to go.
Right.
But
Right.
I know some point in time, a lot of them will.
Yeah.
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 I mean, for me, one of the things has always been the newsletter, the monthly published newsletter.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, you send out 1,000 pieces, it's hard to tag a return on the investment for that month. But in the long run, and I've shown it with one client I had, 36 years, 37 years in the process, my only communication, because they're a commonwealth, they're a state, I can't go and pitch them. I can't go and, make sales present. I mean, everything with them has to go through a bid process, but 37 years, they've never wavered and always come back. And the only communication I have with them is a printed newsletter that shows up every month.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
I tell you another quick story. I get a call from a bank president, small town Iowa, a few years ago. And he wants to know if we have an interest in buying a property in small town about 2 hours from where our offices are, if we'd have an interest in buying it. And I mean, rarely do I get calls from bank presidents asking us if we want to buy a property. Just strange. And I didn't know him. I didn't know the guy. And so I said, obviously, yeah, we'd like to take a look at it. But of course, I got to the point where I said, how did you get to me? How did that happen? Right? How did you find me?
Yeah.
Well, here's what he said, that a client of his that owns some other apartment properties somehow gets my newsletter once a month, and whatever else thing I send him once a month. And he was having a conversation with him, and long story short, where I'm going with this, he handed the latest newsletter and actually suggested he read like an article, like something I had in there, and here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and you got stories like I just told, I got a bunch more like that.
Yeah.
And it's just that consistent list follow-up, kind of frame that just is, it sounds so, well, it is, it's just so damn obvious.
And simple.
Yeah. It's just like obvious. It's like simple, but, I'll share you another story with you. The last apartment community we bought, I take it back, not the last one, but the one before that. The guy owned it, a little over 20 years, 144 units. We ended up buying it for a little bit over $6 million. He called me and wanted to know if I wanted to buy it. Here's why he called me. He got my newsletter for 17 years. That's why he called me. He didn't get it on the market with a real estate broker. He didn't do any of that kind of stuff. He called me and said, I've been getting your stuff now for almost a little over 17 years. My wife and I are at a time where it's finally time for us to, do some different things.
Yeah.
What do you say? So anyway, I could keep going on and on with stories like that, but it's just weird. It's just funny how it all kind of, a big part of it, I guess, comes down to having that list,
Yeah.
that foundational list of prospects or customers, and you continue to follow up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And I appreciate that, because without the list, what do you got? Who are you going to talk to? Who are you going to promote to? So I think that's very valuable. Thank you.
Yeah. And at least doing something to compile it. I mean,
Yes.
I know in some businesses it's probably maybe a little bit more difficult. My compiling is just getting leads coming in. And of course, it's easy to find owners of property. You just need to, do research. I know some businesses is probably a little more difficult maybe, but gee whiz, man, that compiling and that follow-up. Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Huge.
get the ear of an audience and start talking to the audience.
Huge. Yeah. Yeah.
So good. Well, I'll keep an eye on the clock here. Any in wrapping up, any last thoughts of wisdom that you can impart on this subject?
You said wisdom. Uh-oh.
I said wisdom.
Make this good.
All right. Knowledge, experience. Pick the word.
Yeah, I got one thing, and this may sound a little bit obvious to, viewers or listeners. But what we've described in the short time that we've been together, in the short abbreviated way we've described it, the list and follow-up. One thing that you'll find when you do that is you will have months where you don't really see much in terms of return on your investment. In terms of your investment of time, energy, and money. When you do this, there'll be some months where it's nothing, right? The garden isn't growing. Okay. Yeah. The garden's not growing, but you don't want to get discouraged at that point in time. You don't want to be thinking that what you're doing is not working. You want to have the capacity to continue to see it as a continued investment, month in and month out. And if you do that, you'll eventually see some great fruits of your labor. Far too many people will stop too short of that and think that they're not doing the right thing.
Smart. Darin, if somebody wants to find out more about what you do, has interest, how can they, where would you send them? How do they get and find out more about you?
Yeah, I'll give you a website. It's daringarman.com, and I'll spell that because you can have a lot of different ways of doing that. So it's DarinGarman.com. So daringarman.com, that'd be probably the easiest place to go to get access to me and stuff that I've got and that kind of thing. That'd probably be the best place to go.
Okay. And what if they want to find out about the Heartland stuff?
Same place. You want to go there.
Okay.
And if anyone wants to, what a lot of people like to do is they like to page through, and kind of rifle through what we have. It's called our property catalog. And just like the old time catalogs, color catalogs, we got the same thing, except it's got our properties just to see, what's this all about and what's going on. You want to go to that website, or I'll also leave a phone number too, where you can call and just request one sent to you. And there's no obligation. It's 319-350-5378, 319-350-5378. And that's in addition to DarinGarman.com.
Perfect. I appreciate it. Darin, thanks for taking the time to spend with me, to share your insights in that. To the audience, go back, replay this, take your notes, because you'll pick up more each time you go through it. Your perspective, your situation will be different. So as I mentioned, I think in there is we forget more than we learn. So it's helpful to always go back. Thank you, Darin, again for joining me today. Appreciate your time very, very much.
Hey,
And
thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun, Ron. Thanks a lot. I appreciate you. Appreciate the work that you're doing here. Thanks a bunch.
thank you, sir. And everybody, this is Ron Sheetz, been the One Thing Business Podcast. Go out, be successful. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm sure you got a lot from this episode. Join Ron and his next guest here on the One Thing Podcast.